What are you looking for? Oh. All right, we will get started. Yeah. I'll let everyone know that as well. Okay, so for this session, unless you're going to take notes, I would ask if you just don't mind closing your computer. If you want to take notes on your computer, that's okay. But I'm just going to be sharing some information with you, and I will share. That's okay. You can leave them. We'll pick them up later. I will share these slides with you. The slides from the whole day, so don't feel like you have to write everything down. So for returning teachers, most of this you will know, but wanted to sort of just establish baseline since the training has been sort of different each year as new teachers have joined. So this slide is not going to like surprise you, but I just wanted to sort of share. I had the opportunity this past year. I was in graduate school, and I was doing an ed policy program, so I had the chance to do some research and learn a little bit more about the root of the sort of problems that I saw in my classroom. So I just wanted to start by sharing a little bit of the research. LPS was created because one teacher saw something in her classroom and wanted to fix it. It wasn't like it was heavily researched and then we crafted this program because of the research, but there is actually a fair amount of research that's supporting what we're doing, so that's good. And I wanted to share a little bit of that with you all and then just go over an overview of the program so that the new teachers kind of can start to get a sense of the flow of the year. So we know that STEM is a very lucrative field, and we know that it is growing. So we know that there are lots of opportunities for our students to go into STEM careers that will provide economic mobility and be secure for our students. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we're all here, is that we want our students to feel like they have access to those, and that they feel that the students feel like they have access to those opportunities. We know that people who have bachelor's degrees in STEM fields earn more than anyone else with a bachelor's degree. We also know that there are many groups that are underrepresented in STEM and that have felt excluded from STEM for a really long time. And so you can see from this graph here, comparing the number of STEM bachelor's degrees awarded and the percentage of the U.S. population each of these different categories make up. So unsurprisingly, white men make up less of the U.S. population and more percentage of the STEM bachelor's degrees. And then we have significant underrepresentation in women of color, and many other groups. So I just think it's sort of striking to see a graph like this and sort of acknowledge that there's a lot of work to be done to make STEM feel like it's for everyone. We also know that students are foreclosing on STEM really early. Often in middle school, they're deciding whether they feel like STEM is something that they can do or they feel welcome in or not. And so this is a really important time. And we're seeing STEM achievement gaps emerge as early as 7th grade. But what we're also seeing is that students who are reporting that they're interested in STEM and they see the value of STEM are much more likely to continue choosing STEM classes. And students who are performing well in science class but don't see the personal value of science and don't understand how science relates to their lives are making up this achievement gap in 7th grade, even though they're all of a sudden dropping off. So it's really not that they are not capable of doing STEM. It's really that they're sort of there's like a disconnect between how does STEM relate to my life and what can I do with STEM. I saw this in the research, but I also experienced this in my life, and I'm sure you guys do too. Many adults see STEM ability as fixed. They say like, oh, I'm not a science person. Like I can't. Don't talk to me about science. And so we think about what that does for our students is that they're seeing all these adults, maybe even adults in their school, who are saying to them, oh, I don't know about science. And so that sort of makes it seem like there's this dichotomous, like you're good at STEM or you're not good at STEM. And so seeing that ability as fixed is an obvious hindrance to students feeling like they can develop science and math abilities, and not that it's like, well, never was good at science, so I'm never going to be able to learn science. And so this is sort of related to the growth mindset research, with which I'm sure many people are familiar with, but this idea that helping students see that intelligence is malleable, helping students see that understanding and growing their science brains is possible, and that they don't have to already be good at science or already know a lot of science in order to be interested in science. So after doing a fair amount of research, I sort of tried to put together a theory of how middle school students develop belief systems about STEM and how that impacts what they believe to be possible for post-secondary careers. So there were sort of three big buckets that I found, and they are in a very particular order. So as I mentioned before, students who saw the value of science were much more likely to continue engaging in science, even if they weren't that strong at science. So this value of science was really important to be first, and then for people to have, or for students to have, sort of feel like they've been successful doing science. So having those mastery experiences in science, and understanding the value of science, and then saying like, oh, I can do that too. And then finally is developing a STEM identity. So thinking that like STEM is a thing that I can do. Like I belong here, and my opinions and my ideas are valid and appreciated in the science community. Was the third thing, and developed only after students felt like they valued science and had these successful experiences in science. And then we also have the challenge that if you don't know about a career, it's really difficult to imagine that you could aspire to that career. So broadening students' awareness of what the possibilities are in science is another really important step. And I think in middle school it makes a lot of sense for that at the time when they're learning about these different careers. So with that, I just wanted to share the vision that we have for the program and the mission of the organization. So our vision is we envision a day when all students have equitable access to science role models and believe that they can become a scientist. And our mission is to demystify STEM careers and empower, by creating personal connections between students from high poverty schools and real scientists. So that's what we're trying to do. These are the 4 goals that we had. We made these for the program last year. We may modify this bottom one slightly in the back. Can you guys read this slide? Okay, so I'll just give you a second to read those 4 goals. So we're really trying to do a couple of things. Like we're trying to show that beyond just what happens in science class, science can be interesting, and you can want to look up videos about science, and you can want to join a science club and go to a science camp, and that like general interest in science, increasing that by connecting to a scientist role model. And then the next 2, broadening students' awareness of who can become a scientist, like what scientists look like, but also broadening students' awareness of what scientists do while they're at work, understanding that they're not all chemists that blow things up wearing lab goggles. So understanding like that you can work in the field, you can work in a lab, you can work for the government, and understanding that there's all these different types of science, understanding that you can have a high school diploma or a PhD and work in science, and understanding that you can work in the US or you can work abroad, or you can travel for work and be a scientist. So sort of just broadening that perception of what it means to have a career in science. And then this 4th one, helping students identify as future scientists, I think this is the most important goal, and I also think it's the one that we're not doing that well yet. So I think that right now we're doing a good job of connecting students to scientists who can show them like, oh, I didn't know that you could, travel for work. I didn't know that, there were jobs in whatever, science writing or something like that. But where I think I'm going to work really hard this year is to figure out how can we have them then transfer that knowledge and say, okay, someone else can do this thing, now I know about this thing, now I want to believe that I can do this thing. And so this is sort of something we'll be working on. And I think, there are some activities and even the scientists sometimes are empowering the students to believe that they can do that, but I think that that's the area sort of growth for us for next year. Does anyone have any questions about these or thoughts? I also just want to give you like a brief history of the program so you sort of understand where we've come from. So as I mentioned, 2010 is when the program started. It started in a rural classroom in eastern North Carolina when our founder, Macon, who was teaching, linked up with Anna, who was doing her PhD, and together they found enough scientists to match her students with STEM professionals, and they exchanged letters. I got involved in 2012. We transferred the program from eastern North Carolina into Durham, North Carolina. Macon decided to go do a master's in public health, so she no longer had students to teach, and so she reached out, and I connected with her on Facebook, and tried the program in my classroom. So I sort of saw it in a more urban setting and in a rural setting, and it having a pretty similar impact on the students. So even though my students were like in Research Triangle Park, a huge biotech hub, they were not very well connected to people who actually worked in the biotech fields. So although they were closer in proximity, because it was a very low-income school, they still did not really have access to people who were in those fields. And then over time, we slowly began to formalize. And so I should note that I met Macon for the first time in person in, I think, 2016. So we worked together for 4 years without ever having met in person. And I didn't meet Anna until 2018. So I worked with her for a very long time without actually meeting her in person. And so we sort of were all working full time, but just slowly scaled the program. In 2016, we were in 7 classrooms in California, Florida, Illinois, New York, Ohio, and Oklahoma. And we really realized that we were at a tipping point where we could not really expand more without revising our model and making sure that the teachers had more support. So I decided in 2017 to leave the classroom and work on Letters for Free Scientists more full-time. I was also moving across the country and applying for graduate school. So we had 9 classrooms. We also got fiscally sponsored, so we were just like a volunteer organization. We had no legal status or we weren't formed in any way. And so we got a fiscal sponsor, which basically means we piggybacked off of another nonprofit's tax-exempt status so that we could start raising money. Prior to this year, we ran on an annual budget of $400, but basically just enough to buy stamps, and that was like all we had. And so we were in 9 classrooms. You see the states change slightly. California is always well represented. And then in 2018, we actually incorporated as a nonprofit organization in Massachusetts. We got our first grant last year, which is why we have this awesome conference. And we were in 12 classrooms last year, serving 850 students. And then just last month, we got our tax-exempt status from the IRS. So we are now a fully independent nonprofit organization. And Janelle started 2 weeks ago. I started at the beginning of July. So we're newly transitioning into having the capacity to actually do cool stuff with LPS, not when our brains are like super tired or on the weekends. And we doubled in size this year, so we'll have 25 classrooms. We have 8 returning teachers. Can you raise your hand if you're returning so people can see? We have one that's here, in Bridget's outside, and we have one teacher, Sarah Murphy, who works at the same school as Bridget, who's also returning and is not here. And we have 17 new teachers. 2 of them are not here, and the rest of you all are here. And you are from California, Ohio, Illinois, South Carolina, Georgia, and Louisiana. We tried to target our recruitment much more this year, so we did some analysis of per pupil spending on science in the state, 8th grade science achievement, and like concentration of STEM careers, and sort of combine that with states that taught the next gen science standards. Identified some states where either there were a ton of science professionals, but the scores were super low, and so it felt like an obvious place that we could connect those 2 groups, or places where there were not a lot of STEM professionals, and the scores were pretty low as a state, so it felt like an opportunity for us to connect remotely to science professionals. So these are the states. We will serve over 1,700 students this year, which is amazing. And the plan is to double in size again next year. So we'll have 50 teachers next year, assuming we can get the funding, which will become my primary responsibility after all of you guys are set up. So I'm actually very glad that we got the opportunity to do this training with the 25, because I feel like this is it's manageable to get to know 25 people, and it's like sort of a special opportunity. We're kind of considering you guys are like founding teachers of the nonprofit. Yeah. And then I wanted to do a quick, just maybe raise your hand, or I don't know if you feel like standing up, stand up. There's some commonalities between you all that I want to make sure you guys see, and I know that everyone might not represent one of these facts, but if the fact applies to you, will you just, let's stand up. It feels like we've been sitting for a while. So if it applies to you, stand up. So if you work in a rural school, stand up. Look around, get to know your people. Great, thank you. If you work in Moreno Valley, stand up. Did you guys all know each other before?
Not yet.
Okay, good. I was like, I hope that we make a good connection. If you have over 10, just do 10 first. If you have over 10 years of teaching experience, amazing. Now stay standing if you have over 15 years of teaching experience. So much respect. If you teach the next gen science standards in either form, stand up. Cool. If your state or your district has implemented a new standardized test in the past 2 years, stand up. Yeah, so we're all dealing with the same struggle of that. Thank you. And if you're the only science teacher at your school, stand up. Oh, I'm surprised by that. Well, I had that situation as well. Or I should put, if you're the only credentialed science teacher at your school, because that's what usually happened to me, is that I was the only one who was actually a science teacher. If you teach all subjects. Good, that's cool. Okay, cool, thank you. So just so you can see some of the commonalities, want to just quickly go over the program. So this is an overview timeline, and you will get more details, but basically during the summer, we train the teachers, we recruit scientists. We are at 1,850, so 1,850 scientists who have registered to be pen pals. We are shooting to get to 3,000 that register. We lost about a third of them that never completed the training last year, so we want to make sure that we have enough. Last year we had an outrageous number of scientists. We had more scientists on the wait list than we had matched with students, so we had like 800 something scientists on the wait list. But this year, since we're doubling in size, we need like everyone we have now and more. So we are registering them now, and then they'll receive the training in early August, and they'll have the month to complete it. And then September, students will get permission slips. So I know a lot of your schools start in August, and you will be able to collect permission permission slips in August. We're going to talk a little bit later about why, but we're going to try to do one big matching, run the script for matching, because the more scientists who are in the pool, when we match your students, the more likely, so we use a computer algorithm that does the matching. So the bigger the pool of scientists and the bigger the pool of students, the more likely that everyone's going to get an optimized match. So if your school starts in August, you'll be able to collect permission slips. You'll be able to have students take the student interest survey. So this survey serves two purposes. One is to tell us about what their science interests are and what their non-science interests are and how interested they are in science. Yeah. Yes. Actually, this survey is not in Spanish, but we can talk about translating. Definitely. So one of the purposes for us to collect the information that we use to match the students. So what we use to match the students is what their science interests are. So they'll get a list of like machines, animals, plants, computers, space, and they'll select a couple that they're interested in. Then we also ask them, how interested are you in science? So like 1 to 5 stars, how interested are you in science? Then we also ask them, what are your non-science hobbies? So like skateboarding, cooking, drawing, music, whatever. We ask the scientists those same questions, and then those are the 3 things that we use to match. So if the student reports 3 or more stars interest in science, then the algorithm prioritizes their science interests. If the student says like 1 or 2 stars, like I don't really like science that much, the algorithm also incorporates their non-science hobbies in the match, so that hopefully they feel like they have something in common with their science. Yeah. It's electronic, yes. In the past it has always been a Google form, but this year it will be an Airtable form. So it'll just look like a link that you'll post. It'll be like tinyurl/interest survey 2019 or something like that, and then the students will take that during class. And the other purpose of that survey is for us to collect like the baseline pre-information about what your students think about science, how they value science, so that we can take the post information and compare it to the pre-information. So we'll ask them questions. From the PISA test, like the international test, there is clustered questions about like whether you value science and whether you feel like you have a future with science. So there'll be some questions like that on the pre-test so that we can get like a baseline. And then students will also, and we'll talk about this later, do the Draw a Scientist test at the beginning of the year. So that will also happen as part of the programming eval in September. But we'll ask them to draw a scientist at the beginning and end of the year, and then we can compare if they draw if there are any shifts in what they draw. Then once we have all of the teachers, if not as many teachers as possible, in early September we'll have a matching day. So we'll run the script, and then in Airtable all of your students will populate with their scientist pen pals, and so you'll have access to viewing all the scientists that are matched with your students. Everyone who was here last year will be happy to know that we upgraded our Airtable so you can create and download very personalized versions of like a student match card. So you'll be able to decide which fields you want to, we'll create like a template, but you will also be able to add if you want. So you'll be able to download a card for each of your students that has their scientist's name, their address, so they can adjust the envelope, and then it will tell them like what your scientist is a blank. They work in this field. Their interests are this, and so they'll get like some basic information about what their scientists, where they live, what they do, and you'll be able to give those to your students. Then your students will write the first letter, so you'll facilitate the letter writing in your class. You'll collect the letters and mail them off. Get into the details of that later. Then scientists will receive their letter, they'll reply, they'll send them back to your school. You'll keep the letters. When you have one for everyone, you'll have your first letter opening party, which is the best part, and students will read and reply to their letters, and then you'll send the second letter out. I just put fall here because it sort of depends, but usually this happens in October, November. And the theme for, I forgot to mention, the theme for the first letter round, so the first letter that your students write and the first letter that the scientists write is about their career. So really trying to explain what their career is. We're going to work on helping the scientists do that in a better way this year. Then the second round, so the second letter your students write and receive will be about college. So asking the scientists to tell a little bit about their college experience, letting the students ask questions about college, etc. And then we sort of try to take a break between Thanksgiving and Christmas because schools are so crazy during that time. We've not had a lot of success trying to host letter opening day during that time. So it'll be like, get your second letter sent before Thanksgiving break, and then the letters from the scientists will basically trickle in throughout December so that in January you can have your second letter opening day. And so approximately like January, March, May, but we'll work on individual calendars for each school. You will have letter opening days and then have your students write back. The theme for round 3 is overcoming obstacles. So we ask the scientists to write about an obstacle that they've overcome, and we ask the students to reflect on how they overcome challenges when they see them. Last year we didn't have a round 4 theme, but I think this year we'll have some optional round 4 themes because some of the teachers thought that would be helpful. And then we'll start recruiting in the spring for teachers for next year. And then at the end of the school year, students take the same interest survey and do the Draw a Scientist test again so that we can sort of figure out what our program does and how we can make it better. I know that was really an overview, but does anyone have questions about that? Yeah. Yeah, great question. Yes. So they'll send home a permission slip, and you'll have them take the survey. When you have the student take the survey, it will automatically send an email to Janelle. And so Janelle will reach out to you, and either she'll match that student manually, or we're working on a way where we can run the script so that they get the best match. And then they'll just join. So if it's close to a letter writing day, we'll usually still have the scientist send them a letter, since all the students will be getting letters, and then they can write back. Yep, that's also fine. The scientists are aware that is a possibility, and so there's something in Airtable, which we'll see later, where you just check a box that says left program, and then you'll be able to say why, and then Janelle will reach out to that scientist for you and let that scientist know that your student dropped things. Yeah, so that's a challenge that some schools face more than others. If we know that that's a challenge that your school faces, we can let the entire group of your scientists know at the beginning of the school year that that's a possibility. So we can figure out what the best way to do that. If you think a student's going to come back, we'll probably just try not to put that scientist back into the waiting list because then they could get matched with someone else. So we can figure that out. But yeah, if that is the case for you, if you don't mind just telling Janelle, that way we can plan for that. Is there any question? Yeah.
I have some friends that are scientists or work in the science community. How do I get them to apply for this to be scientists?
Yeah, that is a great question. So if you go on our website, which is prescientist.org, and we're going to put it up in a few minutes, there's a big banner that says scientist registration is now open, and they just click that. They'll fill out a form, and then we'll send them the training when it opens. In particular, we're seeking scientists who do space, who would select space. We often have a number of more students who select space than we have scientists. So if you know all scientists, we need a lot more, so all scientists. And we define scientists very broadly. So anyone who is in a STEM field, including healthcare, including policy, including engineers, mathematicians, people who work in academia. Basically, if that person considers themselves a scientist or a STEM professional, then they're eligible. We have some people in science communication. So.
I have a space science center in our town, and then I have a friend who is obviously most of the students in elementary school, but she is a lawyer for NASA.
Perfect.
So
Yeah,
would that be
definitely. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
I have a parent last year that was sending them
Oh, yeah.
I did send them the link.
Cool.
If they contacted me.
Well, if there's like almost 2,000 of them, so I haven't looked through all of them. But that's awesome. Yeah, please send the link out. I think it's like even more special when the science people you know in your life are also participating. So yeah, you'll see it later. We're gonna have some time to go to our website, so you can send it on often. Cool.
Facebook, so if I'm on Facebook, I can share the post.
Mhm. Cool. Yeah. Okay, I don't want to cut into your break, but this is a question that we often get from people is like, why are you doing handwritten letters and why are you using snail mail in this age of technology? And so I wanted to just quickly address that, again, this is an area where we found research afterward that actually supports what we were doing, and so we're going to continue doing the program the way that we were doing it, which is we found research that when students handwrite versus typing on the computer, they actually write more and they write more complex sentences. So having students handwrite is actually allowing them to write more and write better letters. We think that this is because there's a additional cognitive load of them. I don't know about your students, but my students are like this on the keyboard, even though they grew up with computers. So it's like an additional cognitive load for them to type and also think about what they want to say. The wait time for a response actually really increases engagement. So in this time where students are like used to the instant gratification, actually having to wait for the snail mail response makes the students much more excited when they actually receive the response. Snail mail, yeah, okay, we said that. And obviously snail mail lowers the bar to entry. So most towns have a post office, and so that's really the only thing that you need in order to be able to participate in our program. When we were founded in 2010, there was a real concern about lack of access to internet in schools. I think that is less of a concern today. I think about 85% or so of schools are connected to pretty good internet at this point, but we want to make sure that we're accessible to all schools and all students, and so the snail mail allows us to access everyone. And it also keeps our costs really low. So the fact that each student basically only needs the paper and the stamps means that we can keep our costs really low. So yeah, we're going to take a break. We will give you 15 full minutes. So if we can come back at 10:18, and I'll keep this top up here. There's coffee and water. Did you set up snacks? Okay. And Janelle will go grab some snacks as well if you're hungry. Great. Thanks, guys.